isn't it? This is
Storm Claudia arrived with almost no warning, sweeping across the UK with a force far beyond what forecasters predicted for mid-November. By sunrise, entire regions were dealing with more than 3 inches of relentless rain, swollen rivers, and streets swallowed by rising floodwater. What looked like just another wet winter weekend quickly became one of the most disruptive early-season storms in recent years. But the most dramatic scenes unfolded in the small village of Herefordshire, where the usually shallow Duellis Brook transformed into a violent torrent. Within minutes, water pushed into homes, flooded local shops, and blocked every road leading in or out of the community. Emergency teams rushed in as families scrambled to move cars, lift belongings, and reach higher ground. For thousands watching across the United States and around the world, this storm is more than a headline. It's another reminder of how quickly ordinary days can turn into breaking news.
It's not as good that the rain is picking up again, is it? We're in the flood. There's the turn around. Look how deep.
Storm Claudia made its first major impact late Friday night, unleashing intense bands of rain that stretched across England and Wales. By midnight, gauges in southeast Wales had recorded over 3.2 inches of rainfall, nearly 2/3 of the region's monthly average in less than 24 hours. Northerly winds gusting up to 25 mph pushed the rain sideways, cutting visibility and turning narrow village roads into fast-moving streams. In the village of Herefordshire, the situation escalated at alarming speed. The Duellis Brook, which typically sits quiet and shallow beside the homes and shops of the village, surged upward as runoff from the surrounding hills poured in. Water climbed past the banks, filling parking lots and creeping into basements. By dawn, the brook had swollen to a record level 9.4 feet, surpassing its previous high from November 2024. Residents woke to the sound of rushing water and emergency alerts. Local firefighters and volunteer rescue teams moved door to door, urging families to gather essentials and prepare to evacuate. One corner shop reported water pushing through the back entrance, forcing employees to abandon equipment as they waded out into knee-deep floodwater. For many, the shock wasn't just how much rain fell, but how fast everything changed. Within a few hours, an ordinary storm had turned into a brewing disaster. As dawn broke on Saturday, the true scale of the unfolding crisis came sharply into focus. Emergency crews arriving from nearby towns found entire sections of UA's Herald submerged with water levels rising by the minute. What had been ankle-deep around midnight had surged past 2 feet, swallowing sidewalks, driveways, and the lower floors of several homes. Volunteers worked alongside firefighters, marking hazardous areas where the current was strongest. Fallen branches, loose fencing, and broken pavement lay hidden just beneath the murky surface, turning every step into a potential risk. Local police blocked off access roads, warning drivers that even shallow-looking water could sweep a vehicle off course. Inside the village, residents scrambled to save what they could. Families moved furniture upstairs while neighbors helped elderly residents onto rescue trucks. A small fish and chips shop near the brook was among the first businesses hit, its floors coated in swirling debris as water pushed through both front and rear entrances. Workers were forced to abandon the building as the current intensified. The village hall, normally quiet on weekends, transformed into an emergency shelter within hours. Blankets, warm drinks, and charging stations filled the room as more families arrived seeking safety. For many residents, the fear was no longer about the rain, but about what the next hour of rising water might bring.
In Truro, you see, in Truro.
It's not good that the rain is picking up again, is it?
By early afternoon, the full extent of the destruction had become undeniable. What began as steady rain had transformed into a multi-layered disaster, leaving behind a trail of property damage and paralyzed infrastructure across U.S. Herald and surrounding communities. Preliminary assessments estimated that dozens of homes had taken on water, some with 3 to 4 feet flooding their ground floors, while several small businesses were forced to shut down indefinitely. Road conditions deteriorated rapidly. Deep standing water hid potholes and torn asphalt, and in some spots the force of the stream carved new channels across the pavement. Emergency responders had to reroute traffic repeatedly as bridges, culverts, and back roads became unsafe. Phone lines flickered in and out, and several neighborhoods reported temporary power outages after water reached underground electrical boxes. Local farmers suffered heavy losses as well. Fields on the village outskirts were transformed into muddy basins, endangering livestock and wiping out early winter crops. One farmer described hearing the sound of the land giving way as an entire section of soil collapsed into the brook overnight. Even areas that remained dry felt the ripple effects. Schools closed transit services, reduced schedules, and stores struggled to restock due to delivery delays. The storm's reach extended far beyond flooded streets. It disrupted the very rhythm of daily life, leaving thousands waiting for conditions to stabilize before recovery could even begin. As darkness settled over U.S. Herald, the emotional weight of the storm grew heavier than the floodwaters themselves. With the brook still rising and fresh bands of rain sweeping across the village, residents endured a night defined by fear and uncertainty. Emergency alerts echoed through phones, warning people to stay indoors, avoid basements, and prepare for possible evacuation. For many families, sleep was impossible. Inside the temporary rest center, dozens gathered around portable heaters wrapped in blankets donated by volunteers. Parents tried to reassure children who kept asking whether the water would reach their homes. Elderly residents, some arriving with nothing more than a small bag, sat quietly watching the storm through fogged-up windows. A single question hovered over everyone. How much worse could it get? Emergency crews worked non-stop. Firefighters waded through knee-deep water to check on isolated homes. Local police went door to door along low-lying streets, urging residents to move to higher ground. Volunteer groups delivered warm drinks, dry clothes, and medication to those unable to leave their houses. For many, the most haunting moment came when the brook surged again near midnight, slamming debris against bridge supports with a sound like breaking timber. It was a reminder that nature, not the clock, would decide when this ordeal was over. By dawn, U.S. Herald had transformed into a coordinated battlefield of response efforts. More than 40 emergency personnel, along with local volunteers, moved through the village in a grid-like sweep, checking every home within the flood zone. Fire crews deployed portable pumps to redirect water away from the most vulnerable streets, while police established new barricades where the brook had carved unpredictable channels through the landscape. Utility teams began assessing downed power lines and damaged transformers, working carefully to avoid energized water. Flood engineers mapped the rising water with handheld sensors, trying to predict when and if the Duellis Brook would crest again. Each reading brought a mixture of relief and worry, but it wasn't only officials who rose to the challenge. Neighbors used kayaks to deliver food and bottled water to stranded households. Local farmers offered tractors to help tow abandoned vehicles from submerged roads. A cafe owner opened her doors, giving free hot coffee to responders trudging through the cold. Despite exhaustion, the determination was unmistakable. This was a community refusing to wait helplessly. Instead, they stood shoulder to shoulder with the emergency crews pushing back against the storm, one small victory at a time. Even as rain continued to fall, U.S. Herald showed that resilience can be louder than any flood. As the rain finally began to ease, U.S. Herald found itself confronting a difficult truth. This was not just another storm. It was a warning one carried on rising water, fractured roads, and a brook that broke its banks faster than anyone expected. Residents gathered outside homes marked with tide lines on the walls, talking quietly about how quickly everything had changed. Local officials pointed out that Duellis Brook had risen to 9.4 feet, surpassing last year's record by more than a foot. Meteorologists noted that storms fueled by warmer Atlantic air masses are delivering heavier rainfall in shorter bursts, a pattern becoming more common across the UK and Europe. What hit UA's Herald wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a larger shift that communities around the world are beginning to feel. The storm exposed vulnerabilities that had long been ignored: outdated drainage systems, aging bridges, undersized culverts, and warning networks that struggled to keep pace with fast-moving conditions. Yet, it also revealed something deeper: the strength of a community when tested. People spoke of fear, yes, but also of unity. They recalled strangers helping strangers, volunteers wading through freezing water, and entire blocks working together with no hesitation. In the wake of this storm, U.S. Herald is left with one defining question: will we learn from this? As U.S. Herald moves into the long days of cleanup and repair, the village carries more than physical damage. It carries a story that will not fade. For many residents, the memory of floodwater rushing past doorsteps, the sound of alarms echoing through the night, and the sight of neighbors rescuing neighbors will linger far longer than the storm itself. Emergency crews continue their work clearing debris from submerged roads, restoring power to darkened homes, and reinforcing weakened embankments along Duellis Brook. Families return to houses marked by mud lines, facing the reality of what was lost and what must now be rebuilt. And yet, amid the exhaustion, one thing remains clear: the storm showed the true heart of this community. Across the U.S. and around the world, storms like this are becoming more frequent and more intense, a reminder that preparedness, resilience, and collective action are no longer optional. UA's Herald's story is not just a local event. It's a lesson for all of us. If you want to stay informed about extreme weather, global disasters, and the stories behind them, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more cinematic reports just like this.